Well, we are almost a month into it, into the class, and it's been really interesting because a lot of things have been showing up that I really like. Um, Sometimes I need context. Like if you're doing something that's a little bit different than the assignment and you're not getting the points that you think you deserve, let me know what's going on. And sometimes it's as simple as, this assignment was, I used these materials instead, or something like that, or, describe. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Each of the assignments have specific objectives to them and specific things that demonstrate your skill set that you're comfortable with. And so if you don't get the grade that you deserve, sometimes it's as simple too as just taking a different set of pictures. Like one person missed a couple of points on their house because two of the photos that they sent in were almost identical. One was taken of the house like a half step further back in the same location. And it was just one of those things where they thought they had done 5 different views and it was more like 4.5. So, not a big deal at all. But I do want to remind people that if you do have to resubmit something, please make sure that you resubmit with everything. If, for example, the assignment asks for 3 different files, resubmit all 3 different files. Canvas at this time does not allow you to submit additional material. You have to resubmit everything because the system will overwrite all the previous submissions with whatever you do next, which can be really irritating because if you've done the whole quiz and you missed one question, you've got to retake the entire quiz. Or if you're submitting 6 pictures of something and one of them is the wrong file, you've got to resubmit the 5 previous files plus the additional. Yeah, that's exactly, Camden, that's exactly what is going on. You're right. Camden just said, I wish Canvas did allow for that because there's been moments in other classes where accidentally one of the files was missed and they had to resubmit absolutely everything. Yeah, it's a pain in the neck, but your instructor doesn't really mind changing grades because that's not a big deal. So, if I have had one person got really upset with me because they had to submit 5 different files and they kept submitting one file at a time. They didn't understand why I kept asking for all the other stuff. But it's really good to have all that on the computer record as well. Well, let's see. I have been grading on Mondays and Wednesdays, plugging in some stuff. I am a little bit behind. A lot of people turned in a lot of stuff. My favorite part of grading is when people submit their attendance things, because I could just go back and do that really easily, or work logs. Those are really easy to grade because essentially you get full points for doing it. And unless the work log, if you're submitting a previous work log for a new module or it's a completely different file, then that's the only time points are docked. Or if it's written down. I've had some classes last year, there were a couple students that just did not understand that when you're asked for documents, unless you're specifically directed to take photos of notes, everything needs to be typed in university classes. And not a big deal. And this semester, a couple of people just sent photos of their handwritten notes. And when they found out it had to be typed, it was not a big deal. They took care of it I think one person took care of it in 3 minutes, which was a record. All right. A couple of things I wanted to do today is I wanted to go through just the submissions for the wire, and we'll just talk about each of the ones that came in and how they fit the assignment. So hopefully you won't see everybody's names, But this is the next kind of sculptural assignment that's due. And I also wanted to revisit the discussion that we had last week, and the discussion on the sculpture-based photography. I wanted to go over that as well, and show people what everything needed to be done. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I think this is good. Got some really good examples. Sometimes the class discussions, if you have to respond to other people's works, it can be really frustrating, because if there's 20 people in the class, there's always going to be 3, 4, or 5 people that turn in everything a couple days early, Whitley, and and there's always going to be about 6 or 7 people that will turn it in at the last second. And so when you have to respond to other people's stuff, sometimes it's really tough. If you're one of the 5 or 6 people that turn in everything early, you can get the assignment done really quick, but that means that all of you have everybody else's comments too, that one little teeny group. Usually there's more leeway on when the discussions are due. You have at least a couple days after the due date of the sculpture. But again, oh, hi, Sylvia. Again, it's not that big of a deal. If you guys could hold to a timeline perfectly well, you'd be taking this class in the classroom instead of online. So, this class needs to be flexible for you guys. But try not to get frustrated. What I will do on some discussions is, it may be that you did 2 out of 3 comments, and so I'll give you partial points, and then you'll go back and submit the remaining comment. And if I don't grade it, email me and let me know, because Canvas, I don't always see the notifications. I don't think Canvas actually does send out the notifications when somebody adds a comment. I've clicked all the little boxes to let them do that, but it's not showing up. So if in doubt, email me and remind me, okay? So that I can make sure I get the info. Okay, now I am going to share the a page here, and we'll just go through it and look at the wire sculptures that people have submitted. And I ignore the names. We're just looking at images right now, and we're talking about them. And we're just going to look at the first image on each of them. Okay, so here's one. One of the parameters for this that we talked about in class is that it needs to be standing on its own, and it needs to be 3-dimensional. This one feels, one thing I really like about this is I love the different kinds, the quality of lines that give different textures to a line, but this is not really 3-dimensional. And for this person, since it also needs to stand on its own, what I would say, it looks to me like it's a hummingbird, maybe moving things so that the wings come out a little bit, and then setting it up so that the tail and 2 wing tips form a tripod. Then it would stand on its own and fill that parameter that we talked about. And I think it would definitely look a little bit more 3-dimensional. And if you guys see anything you want to comment about on any of these, let me know. I really like this one. I think this one turned out really well. This looks something like a kangaroo or a rat that's standing up. Either way, it doesn't matter. I think it turned out really well. A couple of things that I like about this are you can see the wire here where they formed an armature, and then they built the body up with all this 3-dimensional wrapping. Now it looks like the wire in the kit itself didn't provide enough to do this, so the person supplemented it with their own, and I think it turned out really well for this. Notice that it's standing on its own with the 2 legs and the tail, and you really get that sense of solidity there, even though you have these big gaps in places and stuff like that. the way that they use the wire as like a three-dimensional scribbling line really gives it some dimensionality. Sorry, my computer is taking a little bit of time to load. I think this is another really good example of that idea of the three-dimensional scribble line. You know, we look at these wing type forms here. This looks like it's a rather healthily fed duck. We have these wing type forms, and we have like a tail type form, and then a lot of energy is put into the body, and it looks very scribbly. I like how the legs are done like this, and it's done so that it can support the whole structure. It looks sturdy. And there's some elements that are kind of fun about it, like this little bit of wire sticking off like a loose feather. And I love kind of the chaos of the body. You can also see that there is a stable structure for it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, we can see the whole thing. What do you guys think about it? I wonder why it stopped.
Reminded me of a chicken. Like I got like a chicken kind of vibe from it.
I'm sorry, now it's not even showing up. Oh, there we go. You're getting a chicken vibe?
Yeah,
but
or
it's
like
very
a rooster
definitely
crowing or something,
Oh, I
like
see.
how its beak is kind of up.
Right, right. Yeah,
And I
I
like
see,
that
like,
the body is fuller than like the wing forms.
right.
Like
A
I
little
think
bit
that
of
adds a
different,
cool contrast.
you get a little bit of different kind of solidity of form. A little bit of, yeah. I think this one turned out really well. This is really an interesting one. I kind of like this. It's a little bit different. You know, it's supposed to stand on its own, and this person chose to have this emerge from a wall. And it looks to me like it's intended to be something of a hunting trophy. And you know, it looks like it's an elk or something. You have the nose right here, the nostrils. You have the antlers. I think this is well done as well, and it has that very definite feel of the scribble line idea. And you have some different, little bit of different things going on. Sylvia, you want to comment about this one?
I really like the way like the antlers are like positioned. Like you can see the little lines of the antlers, but then there's also like it draws your attention also to like the face and like the nose. Like there's the individual nostrils and everything. So I think it's really well done.
Yeah, I like that. Those are good observations. Yeah, it's kind of fun because the antlers aren't exactly mirrors of each other, which you know they aren't in real life either. And I like the way that this person has kind of turned the head a little bit so it's not straight on. Yeah, those are good things to point out, Sylvia. Thank you. Excellent. Oh, this one did the Oliveira route. He's the guy that did the birds so that they look like they were flying. I think this is a really interesting one. This person chose to hang the flying bird. The wire to hang it connects right down here and up here. So this is more suspended. I think this is kind of a fun take on it too. Very much the scribbled lines kind of idea. You know, three-dimensional scribbled lines, but you can make out it's obviously the tail, you know, the claws, the body and the wings and the head. I think this one turned out really well. I think this one is interesting too. What I'd like to see on this one is, I bet they could pull this away from the wall and position the feet so it stood up on its own. I bet they could do that. And if there's any wire left, it would be fun to see that wrapped around the torso and the head to give it a little bit more form. like the hips right here, having a little bit more wire wrapped around. If there's not, this would be great. I would like to see this photographed with it repositioned so that the feet stabilize it. I think that would look really cool.
It reminds me of that Scream painting, like where like the thing
Oh,
goes
yeah.
like this, with the shape of it, like it looks like it's just the outline of that. And I think that's really
Yeah.
cool that it kind of looks similar to that shape.
Yeah, we've got Alphonse Munk's Munk is the shape of that head right there. Yeah. Yeah, that might be even interesting where this is posed so that it's standing on its own, and then the wire hands are on either side of the head. That'd be really interesting. Oh, this is really interesting too. I like how the wire is used to develop the body of the cat and make these whiskers and everything too. It almost feels to me like this is like a quilted doll almost, just because of the way the wire's been used to kind of define the structure. Well, when you were doing this, Sylvia, what were you thinking?
That I was trying to get this volume from the shape while also like trying to like bend the wire. Like it was very hard to bend the wire as I was going when it was all wrapped on that wood. And so I
Yeah.
ended up having to like clip it at some points to just get it to have that shape and that volume. While also it was very difficult from the animal that I chose, because instead of having the cat being like sitting up and having more like interaction and more movement in the cat, I chose to do it kind of while it was like loafing and sleeping. So it was definitely difficult, but I I thought it was cool how it like kind of looked, and my husband saw it and he's like, "Oh, that's a cat." So it was fun.
Nice. All right. It's interesting that we see this one right after, because this reads to me like a cat as well. And it's fun to see how, with you get a little curlies right here that kind of represent the fronts of their paws. And this one is looks like it's sitting, paying attention to something. But I kind of like having Sylvia's and this so close to each other so we can kind of compare them with each other. That's kind of a fun thing to see. But I like how this person, there's a lot of energy in the wire on this. It feels like a really frantic scribble drawing. Then we go back and look at Sylvia's, and this one feels like it is more restful, a little bit more relaxed. And I kind of like that, because that cat is laying down and this one is poised, looking like it's getting ready to play. And I think that I really love when you guys do this, where you use the material to kind of give the idea that you're to give you an additional layer of vocabulary to express what you're doing. I think that's really fun to see. This is an interesting one too. And it looks like this is, I don't know how they got this to stand up, but it looks almost like this is like a dancer of sorts. And I think this is a really interesting take on the project as well. You can see a little bit of the armature. The wires are coiled around up here, forming it. I think if the person wanted to do anything more to this, it would be interesting to see like another little bit of wire put through the arms or to support the head shape. This one I think is really interesting too. It looks to me like it is almost like a bird feeder or something. It looks to me like it's almost like an appliance. And I like how they added a different color of wire here on the right-hand side towards the base. This one is a little bit more practically made, where it's very confidently describes the structure itself. Again, I don't know exactly what it is, but it looks like it's a real world object, and it is inherently stable. It looks like to me that Canvas will do this occasionally as well, where it will just arbitrarily angle your photos so that they're 90 degrees off of what you had intended. And it looks like it did that. What I like about this is that the base is very stable, and it's kind of a fun texture to see these wires coiled together to make the stem. And I like the center of the flower. For something like this, to really make it feel dimensional, sometimes it's nice to have like another leaf or two to kind of flesh that out a little bit. And it's kind of, if anything can be added to give a little bit of volume or something to the leaf and to the petals, I think this would look pretty cool. I think this is interesting. I have had a person do a really simple flower where there was just one length of wire for that, and then they made the leaves and stuff by bending it, and it wasn't very three-dimensional. Like, you know, this one is pretty three-dimensional. And how they compensated for that is that they made about 20 of them, and then they used them and bent them in different ways so that the whole thing was a dimensional bouquet. And that was really an interesting way of addressing it. All right, great. If any time you guys want to or feel you need to readdress any of the things, go ahead and redo it. For the people that haven't turned this stuff in, go back and watch that segment again and look at what other people in the class have done. I think people are really getting the gist of this, and it's interesting. I could tell pretty quickly which artists people were looking at in that background section. You know, which artists impacted them. You could see like Oliveira in the owl, and see a little bit of Anthony Gormley in a couple of them, and it's kind of fun to see that. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments about what we just looked at? Oh, Camden, were you talking about the cat? I'm sorry, I didn't see this. Okay, Camden is talking about the cat. One of the things that he said was it took him just a little bit to realize what he was looking at, but he loved the way the wires intersected and made different forms within the structure itself. That's a good observation. Right, now, the next thing I want to do is get to one of the discussions. In our diversity collaboration discussion, I just wanted to go over that really quick and show you, everybody sees what the discussion looks like for everybody. But I wanted to kind of show you what it looks like from my side, so that hopefully it's a little bit less confusing. Oh, that was the wrong one. Let's see. Maybe it's not. Oh, yep, it's not. Okay. All right, there are three parts to the discussion. And the third part is something that we do, you know, it's the after action report. So the first part, we show artwork or stuff from the world of art that is divisive, stuff that is unifying, and then talking about it a little bit. And I'm using this is just one of the many good examples that people did. Where this person talks about, the Nazi propaganda drawings, and then also talking about the idea of religious art being unifying, which I think is really good. So, and this person wrote quite a bit about that. And then it talked a little bit about how they could be collaborators themselves. And usually parts 2 and 3 are together, where you talk about how this, just being aware of this, has changed your perspective or what your perspective is on it. And then also just discussing our discussion of it as well. And so I think that this person did pretty well too. One of the things that I think is interesting in these discussions is divisive stuff can be really harsh to look at a lot of the times. And it's interesting to me that almost everybody spoke about what makes it divisive. And then on this one, this entry that we see, they've done the first part really, really well. And for this to get full points, all they got to do now is just go back in after watching last week's video and answer questions 2 and 3. And questions 2 and 3, I'll get to that. Oh, wait a sec. What am I doing? Sorry, there's a little bit of user interface issue. Okay. So part 1 is what everybody's done, the divide and unify are examples. Part 2 is either participating in or watching that discussion. And that, again, that is the discussion that we had last week. So let's see, what would that be? Discussion for week, I think it's 5/20, maybe, May 20th is what it's under. I can find that really quick. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, it's attendance for week of May 20th is the discussion you want to look at for part 2. And this can be helpful too. If you didn't attend it live with the rest of us, watch that and have talk to somebody in your family or roommate, just talk out your ideas a little bit. And then the third part is submitting a written reflection. And in these reflection, the really important things are 3 things you learned from our class discussion and how the class changed how the discussion changed your perspective, how you can be a collaborator moving forward. So if you don't feel that you put those in yet, go back and submit that as part of the discussion as well. Again, that is something that is you can't really submit until after we have the discussion. So if we go back to this submission here, the person talks about both of these, and then the last thing that they need to do is submit to the discussion board their response to the discussion and the change in the resulting change in their perspective. Does that help people who may not have understood what the assignment was? Does that help you guys? Okay, Camden says, still need to do the final part of this. Most people do, and that's not a big deal. After watching the video for attendance for week of May 20th, just go back and reread the assignment description and go ahead and plug that in. And then that'll be great. And I will grade those probably on Sunday. This one is by Emily. Remember we talked about the Degas dancer? What Degas was doing was just making a sculpture of a dancer, and that's all he was doing. And this became divisive because of people's reactions to it, which she points out, which I think is really wild. And then Kahinda Wiley. Kahinda does the near photorealism from the Baroque and Age of Enlightenment, but he does it with very contemporary and urban accoutred models, which I think is really an interesting take. So this person also needs to submit those final portions of the discussion after watching the attendance video for week of May 20th, they'll need to write a response. We talked about this, same kind of thing. Really good examples of divisive and unifying, but this person still needs to go back and submit that last portion like we just talked about. This person did add those last portions. So they list 3 things they learned from class discussion, and it's definitely raised my awareness of what I choose to say with my art. These are really good submissions. You know, they didn't have to write very much. They wrote a lot more about their examples that they submitted. But that's part 2, is the 3 things learning from the class discussion from last week, and then the things that raised their awareness. Okay, and this person talked about Jane Quincy Smith as well as cinema. So they still need to add those last 2 paragraphs, part 2 and 3. And this person did, again, a good example of doing it, where they directly addressed our discussion and then the shift of their perspective. And sometimes there's not a dramatic shift, it's just being aware of your perspective. And what is interesting to me is I've lived long enough that I've seen how vocabulary of the quote unquote right thinkers has changed. And I think that for most of the people that have come through the art program that I've worked with on this particular assignment, it's interesting to me because most of you, there isn't really a shift of perspective. You're just describing your own awareness, which I think is wonderful, because 40 years ago, ideas of diversity collaboration was absurd. You know, this was a non-problem from many people's perspectives. And it is exciting to me to see that today there isn't really everybody is really aware of the need to give people boots so that they can pull themselves up with their bootstraps. You know, you're aware of those kinds of issues, and it's just a matter of adding perspective and vocabulary to how you express yourselves, and just being aware of what you have a tendency to want to do anyway. So this person has some really good examples. They still need to submit part 2 and 3. So I think that would be good. But maybe this qualifies as 2, but let's see. All right, this is really good, talking about these examples, and they still need to do part 2 and 3. And this person did a really good job with their part 2 here, and then part 3 as well. So very good. It's exciting to me also to see that most of the artists at UVU take the time to research, so they understand what's going on. And I really appreciate that. And this is good too, because they put part 2 and 3 into the same paragraph. So excellent. I really like these 2 paintings. Very divisive here. It almost doesn't matter what side of an argument a person is on. It's interesting to me that the tendency, especially in social media, is to be derisive and divisive and dismissive of the other person's point of view. And everybody has a right to do that. That's part of what makes freedom of speech work. But what we don't have a right to do is earnestly try to shut down somebody else's perspective, which I think should help us to remember. If we want other people to listen to our point of view, we need to couch our words and expression in such a way so that their hackles aren't immediately raised. Confrontation rarely leads to unification. I love this very smooth and flowing work right there. So on this assignment, if you don't get all the points, just look at what I've written down and respond to what I've written. Because most of the time, it looks like most people have done the divisive and unifying part really well. I like this, talking about divisive being, even if a monument is offensive, we still don't have the right to destroy somebody else's property. And then the unifying with, these, putting these, making a photo collage. And so if you don't get all the points on this one, just see what I've written and go back and touch on the other stuff. And I think the things that we're missing for the people that did miss the stuff were just part 2, which is 3 things you learned from the discussion. And again, that's the discussion that we had last week during the attendance for the week of May 20th. And then the part 3, which is what can I do moving forward? Out of you 3 guys that are here, 3 folks that are here, was there anything that you really got out of that discussion that was positive or gave you a little bit of a broader range of vocabulary to express what you've already got?
I just liked seeing all of the different things that people found that kind of spoke to them. Because I feel like we're all so different anyway, and so seeing the art from others' perspectives, like something that I might not have thought was I don't want to say offensive because that wasn't the intention behind the work, but like what was divisive for somebody necessarily didn't seem divisive for me. But then when like I read their understanding, it helped me see their perspective more. And so I feel like it gave me a better understanding of being more conscious of things, like if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because when we start paying attention to multiple perspectives like that, it's fascinating to me because there are things that we ourselves may do that can be offensive to somebody else. We don't have any idea as to why. And sometimes there are things that are also things that can be used to unify that we have absolutely no understanding. It just needs to be emphasized a little bit. I think that's really amazing. Like growing up, I taught myself how to use chopsticks because I thought that proved I wasn't racist. And I would make, I'm talking 30, 35, 40 years ago, where I would make comments about how, to the waiter in a Chinese restaurant, that the food didn't taste right unless I ate it with my chopsticks. And what is so obnoxious about that is it wasn't until I made friends with one of the kitchen staff at a university I was teaching at, who he lived in the US for about 3 years and he moved from mainland China. And as we were talking about that, he explained why my attitude was abrasive when I thought it was encompassing. And I remember he it was just, it opened my eyes to how unintentionally offensive I had been, and really expanded a vocabulary of expression where, I could use it as an opportunity to start conversations and make friendships, as opposed to being, what's the word I'm looking for? Snotty, abrasive, egotistical, without even being aware of it, which I think is really funny. But Sylvia, was there anything from last week's conversation that struck you as really interesting or eye-opening, or helped your vocabulary?
I think just kind of going over like the different observations, like when we were looking at the different examples that people had posted, that helped kind of with almost like the critical thinking type aspect of, instead of like this is a, like when you're just comparing the two of the unified and the divisive, pulling from like a prior lesson that we had of like, it's not criticizing, you're just observing the differences between them. Like, does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I really love that, the application of critical thinking, the model of critical thinking that we're using in this class is specifically designed so we can examine what we have in front of us, instead of giving ourselves voice to jump to lots of unwarranted conclusions. So I appreciate that. And it does help. A lot of us will have immediate emotional reactions to things that we see the first time. And there was an art critic in the 50s who wrote about that. And his conclusion was that if it's not something that reaches you in 3 seconds, it's just not worth your time, which I think is such a waste of energy. When we use that model of critical thinking, that describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate, it forces us to step away from a purely emotional response and allows us to do a little bit deeper thinking. And I really appreciate having this kind of discussion in our class after we are introduced to that idea, because it's really helped to avoid a lot of confrontational situations, because people take a moment to realize, okay, I can understand that this would be offensive, but I'm thinking about it. I know that that's not their intention. But it also allows us as well to say, well, my initial reaction could be something that would be taken as offensive, but if I'm just using my critical thinking skills and describe what I see, then I sidestep a lot of that potentially abrasive language. So I think that's a really good observation, Sylvia. It is fascinating to me that when people choose to think and then respond rather than emotionally react, conversations always go better. I have not come across a single exception to that. When people choose to think before they talk, it always goes better. So yeah, very, very good observation. And Camden was typing something, but Camden, if you want to add that in later on, that'd be great. Or there's the 3 little winking dots next to it. Okay, here we go. Camden says, similar to what other people said, reading other people's responses and learning to understand different perspectives on divisiveness was really interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the 2 things that really stand out for me are the short discussion about defacing somebody else's monument, even if it was offensive, and the critic's response to Degas' Little Girl Dancer. That was really interesting to me, because we typically don't think of those responses as being in the divisive nature of, or divisive realm of art. And I thought that was eye-opening to me. So I really love the different takes, different perspectives that people supplied. So excellent. Now I am, let's see, we talked about module 2. I want to talk about module 3, and notice that the number changed. It used to be module 4, and I switched position last year, and I just didn't change it because I'm quirky, and I thought I don't know, I thought it would kind of be irritating, and I thought that'd be funny. So this had been module 4 that we are doing next, but since it's the third one, I decided to go ahead and name it what it is, module 3. Let's see, but it should be open. If you guys feel that any of the due dates are a little bit too collapsed or a little bit too spread out, let me know, because we can change them. It just depends on what works with you guys. Okay, now the next module that we're going to be talking about is structure with the skin. And I want to share a couple things with you before we get into that too much. Let's see, give me just a second here as I fiddle with stuff. Oh, there's something else I wanted to talk about too. The you know what? I think we should do that first. So okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that first. I just have to get to it. Okay, before we go start talking about module 3, one thing I do want to talk about is the discussion for the photography one. And Sylvia touched on that just a little bit in her comment, which I thought was a really good comment. And I'm going to, sorry, I'm trying to rearrange things so I can get to this easier. Okay, there we go. For the discussion on the sculpture-based photography, what people needed to do was, in addition to putting their images in there, they also needed to write a response for each of 3 other students' works, which described in 15 words how the image involved the viewer, in 15 words captured different responses to the house structure, and in 15 words varied the viewpoint. And we're touching a little bit on the tools of artistic critique in this. And do you guys remember the 4 tools of artistic critique again? It's describe is the first one. The second one is analyze, talking about how it was put together. The third one is interpret, what could it possibly mean? And the fourth one is evaluate, is it successful? And these things, we're not talking about those directly in this, but I want you to be familiarized with yourself with those questions. And this is a really good example where the person, they do start off with your house is cute, but they go on and describe their responses to it. So I think that that's a really good one. And they did it for 2 people. They submitted their own photos, and then way down at the bottom, they did it for a 3rd person. So this is well done. This is the way it's supposed to be. So nicely done on that. And then this one, we're also saying same kind of thing, where thoughtful reflections, where they talk about and address those ideas outlined in the description for the assignment. And this one, it was due on May 22nd, but I waited because I knew people would turn in their photos, and then they take some time going back through and readdressing it. Now, these are a little bit short. There needs to be 45 words, and if there's 45 words in it, then that's great. It does it. I would say, rather than keeping track of your word count, if it's too short, you'll have to go back and reword things or add to it. But I would say, pay attention to the questions and try to answer the questions with whatever the number of words is that are necessary. And then if you need to add to it, go back and add to it before you hit the submit button. And as long as you, the object is not to try to be as sparse as you can with the word, but to try to answer those 3 questions and use the vocabulary as well as you can from the assignment description, or from that, not the assignment description, but from that page that says the tools of artistic critique. So this person has some really good photos here. They haven't not submitted those responses yet. So as what I'll do probably on this one is give them half points for submitting the photos. And then once they submit the responses to 3 other students, then I'll go back and regrade it. And if they don't see that in a couple of days, they can email me and I'll go back and double check and make sure that they get the grades. So we've got some solid responses there. Again, we're not looking for brevity. We're looking for making sure that you accomplish the purposes of the assignment description. Okay, and this person also responded to 3 people. The discussions, for the most part, not all of them are going to have these writings, like the one for the wire. You just need to, these are really 3 really good responses. For the wire assignment, or module 2, for the discussion, you're essentially just posting images that you've taken of the wire. All right, this person responded. And again, we're not looking for brevity. We're looking for making sure that you touch on all the points that you need to. Like, these are pretty solid answers. One of the classes I was teaching this last semester, people needed to submit weekly reflections. They were supposed to be 250 words long. Most people did 350 words because that worked out, that discussed what they needed to discuss. And there were several people that submitted things that were only like a couple sentences long. And of course they missed it because they didn't get the word count. But it was interesting to me that the people that just answered the questions and thought about it, used the tools of artistic critique, didn't have any problem with matching word count. All right, it looks like most of the people that turn stuff in with their, looks like this one is just missing 1 response. And that'll do it. But it looks like a lot of people have turned in images of the house, and a few people just still need to, of those, still need to respond. And then other people haven't turned in the images of their house or responded. So make sure you go back and do that, whoever's listening to this. All right, so that was the other thing that I wanted to talk about before moving on. Does anybody have any questions about that, the discussion? Because like I said, primarily the discussion it will be moving forward, you submitting images of your work so everybody else in the class can see it, so that they can do that assignment where you give a critique of the work. Let's see if I'll get to that. Let me share my screen again, and I'll show you, remind you what I'm talking about. We go to your home page right here. We scroll down and look at here, applying the tools of artistic critique. Yeah, you'll see that it's not due until August 2nd. But the critiques on this right here, it has a link to our YouTube channel for the class. And right now the link is for a previous class so that you can see what they've done. And as soon as people start submitting these critiques of their own work, critiques of somebody else's work, I will put those critiques up so you'll watch the critiques from people in this class. And this is a 3 to 5 minute recording, usually most of them about 3.5 minutes long, where you have an image of the artwork on the screen, so nobody will see your face, and then you just record yourself talking about it. And one of the easiest ways to do this is you start a Teams meeting with just yourself, do a screen share of the artwork. Then as soon as you have the screen share showing the person's artwork, you start the recording, and then you just go through those 4 questions, or 4 steps. And the 4 steps are describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And look at this, has a link to other videos that people have taken of themselves doing that. You're just recording your voice. I want to state though that you're not required to record your own voice doing this. I have had people write out the critiques and then have a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or a father, or an uncle, or somebody else read the critique and record that through a Teams call, or even with their phone on a tripod, pointed at the computer. So the only image it's recording is something from that was uploaded to one of the discussions.
So,
Wow.
quick question: do we upload our videos to those artistic critique things?
Yeah, when you see this, I was almost done describing what I was talking about, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
When you see this and you open the assignment, you're going to submit the video as an MOV or an MP4 file. And that MOV or MP4 file that you submit, sometimes people have also submitted links to a Vimeo account, or their own, if they have a YouTube channel, they've uploaded it on YouTube, but that you submit the video file for it, and that's how you get points for it. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I was confused where they were supposed to be submitted because I confused the previous link as the assignment, but I didn't know if that's where we were supposed to upload it, but that makes sense now. So yeah, we're good.
So yeah, on this one, Artistic Critique My Own Work, there is a submission link for that, and you submit the file. And Artistic Critique Someone Else's Work, inside this is a submission link, and that's what you submit there too. So I hope that makes sense. This is not a submission link. You open this, and this just has a link to our YouTube channel, so you can see what people have already submitted if you to get help on that. The first couple of people that do this are usually the bravest in the class, and that's why I said, if you do it in the first 6 weeks, then you get extra credit for this. All right. So does that help, Whitley?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right, great. Now I want to talk, we have about 30 minutes. For the remainder, I want to talk a little bit about, or for the next 15, 20 minutes, I want to talk about this structure with the skin. And I've revamped the directions several times, and they seem to make sense to me. Before you start any of the assignments, please watch the videos for the class. Make sure that you're up to date on all the attendance, because a lot of the questions that people have are answered in the attendance videos. Now, the structure with the skin, the background, see several different artists that kind of fit in this framework that we're talking about. And essentially, and I'll describe what the process is, but each of these people, each of these artists are making things where both the skin and the supportive structure that holds the skin are equally important. And I'm showing you this page so you can get a little familiarity with it, but I've been dinged for showing the actual videos, so we're not going to watch the actual videos. Definitely go through and watch all the videos. Some of the links I've had to change because they're down or they don't work anymore. If that's the case, email me, let me know so I can change the link out and find a different way to give you the same information. Some of these artists are Buckminster Fuller. He is the person who designed geodesic domes. That is the only architectural structure on the planet that actually gets stronger the bigger it gets, which is amazing to me. Another good artist is Frank Gehry. He does architecture where he deals with the idea of flexibility and organic shapes incorporated within the architecture itself. Very interesting take on architecture. He designed, I don't know if have any of you seen the movie Get Smart with Dwayne Johnson and the guy from The Office? The ultimate showdown takes place in the Disney Opera House, which is a structure that was designed by Frank Gehry. And then these other artists are all doing really interesting things. Like Richard Deacon creates these incredible structures that look like they should be architectural features, but they're sculptures. And it's just really a fascinating take on this idea of that balance between the structure and the skin. And the idea for this module, for this part of the class, is to develop a sculpture where you're making something where both the structure itself, the underpinnings of it are important, as well as the skin is important. You're creating something where people want to see different aspects of it, because the skin in some ways gets in the way, and at other times kind of frames. And I'll describe that with these three examples here. What you'll need to do is create a module that's about the size of your fist. And this module you're going to use as a building block. You're going to make 4 to 6 of them. You're going to make several of them that are pretty much identical, and then put them together to build a sculpture. So you're essentially making your own set of Legos, for example. On this first one, that's right, the image that's right above the word conceptualization, you can see that the structure, the module that the individual made for their sculpture, is this kind of crate type form. It's a rectangular crate. And that's it, but you'll notice that on this, not all these structures are identical. You have an obvious rectangular crate here, there's one right here, there's one right here, there's one right here, but then this one looks like it has a triangular bite taken out of it. And then these two have chunks taken out of it as well. So they've used a module, and they've made, it looks to me like 7 of these, but they're not all identical. And that's perfectly fine, but they're roughly the same. And you'll also notice that they use cardboard as their skin. And on these two, the skin covers the front face of it. This one, it covers the front face. And these two, it's covering the front face and the top. This one is covering a side. This one is covering the top and one of the front faces, but since it's at an angle, it's not quite the front face. And the reason why that's important is that they're using, the module is this crate as defined by sticks on the edges, and the skin is a couple pieces of cardboard applied to one or more faces of each of these crates. And then they built the sculpture in 3 dimensions by sticking the crates together. Is that making sense to you? Can you guys see that, what's going on? Where the module is almost the same, repeated over and over again, but it's not quite the same. You can make it identical. You look at the middle image here, and this person, the module is this triangular form and this triangular form put together. It looks like it's 2 almost tetrahedral shapes. In this case, the person made 8 that are completely identical. You see this line, you see this line, it's a pyramid this way, a pyramid that way, and they applied the skin on this triangular face and this triangular face, and then they made 8 that are exactly the same, But to make the three-dimensional structure, they put these four and attached them on this same edge. And then these four are mirrors of these original four, and they've attached them on a similar edge and then combined them back here. Can you see that? When we can see that the skin, even though it's on the same place in each of these modules, right here, it kind of hides some of it. And back here, it kind of frames a little bit. Here, the skin hides a little, and back there, it kind of frames it a little bit. I hope this is making sense to you as you do this. And I will, as soon as I see these, see several of these come in, I think now there's just a couple of them. As soon as I see more coming in, then I will talk about it more next week, so you get a better handle on what's going on. Here, so this one, the modules that they made to make their sculpture are all identical, including where the skins are, and they just kind of rotated them around as they put them together. Here, the modules change a little bit. It's that same crepe form, but you have more than half of them are regular apple crate type boxes, and then 3 of them have these all little changes to them where triangular sections are cut out. And then on this, the module is a little bit harder to define. It looks like there's a triangle here, or a trapezoid here and a trapezoid there, and they're kind of organically put together. And it looks like that might be what the module is, and then the person just ended up making several of them. It looks like they made about 12 of them. It's a very simple module. It's not a standalone shape necessarily. It looks like it's just 2 trapezoids put together. But by altering where they've applied that skin, some of these are triangles, some of them are trapezoids. And then by taking this module and putting it together in like the snake-like serpentine form, they've created this 3-dimensional structure. And you still get the sense of repetitive rhythm. And in some cases, the skin is on the far side of the sculpture from you, the observer. In some cases, it's on the near side, but it makes it so that it becomes very interesting visually. So what do you guys think about what you've seen? These 3 examples.
I think they look really cool. I misunderstood the assignment. Like, I thought we were going to cover our wire sculptures in something. So, like, seeing that it's a totally different concept, like, I'm excited to, like, use materials to come up with something.
Well, and there's, yeah, I'm glad we talked about it today, because people, and if anybody just totally missed it, then, you know, there's an opportunity to rework it a little bit. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is there's 3 different aspects to this where you guys can really let your creativity flow. Camden says he has Whitley. Camden says something very similar to you. He said that understanding it sounds like it's a little bit more fun than he otherwise expected. But the 3 things that I think are interesting is we have the structure, and on these you can almost see that people used something like those craft sticks that are in your kit. You have the skin, which can be paper, and then you also have something in the case of all 3 of those, I think they used hot glue to kind of hold it together. But I wanted to discuss alternatives that people have used before. For the sticks, for the structure, people have taken, for example, straws and used straws. They've also used toothpicks as a good one. I think skewers work better than toothpicks. It allows you a little bit more strength for a little bit larger structures. People have also done things where they've taken origami paper or cut out squares of paper and rolled them up on the diagonal. So you get this rounded toothpick type form and use that. And other people have rolled it up on the edge so you get a round form that looks very much like a straw. And both of those are really interesting to do. Another thing that people are, so, and there's other types of things that people have done. One person used noodles for that structure, which I don't think are very secure. if you're going to use something like spaghetti noodles, what I would do is glue 3 noodles together to make it a lot more sturdier, or a lot more sturdy. And that's going to be a lot more time consuming than I think is probably worth it. But you think of different creative ways that you can come up with the structures. One of the examples, Jason made these with just sticks that he collected on walks that he took in the backyard. And that gives you a little bit more of an organic structure. It might be hard to make identifiably repeatable modules with that, but that might be an interesting take. Then for the material to bind them together, of course, you can use the hot glue gun. But I've also had people use chewing gum and then wrap it with thread or yarn. I've had also people lash this together like as if they were using string or something like that to just kind of tie it together. That's an interesting thing. It seems like one of the more common ones is to kind of glue it with the hot glue and then wrap it with thread or something. And that can give a very interesting effect. Other people have taken masking tape and torn strips that are about 1/4 inch wide and used that to kind of hold it together. I think that's very interesting. Several people have used Gorilla Glue, which is also kind of cool. So there's a number of different things that people can use. The chewing gum, if you want to do that, go for it, but you might need to supplement that with wrapping with string to kind of give it a little bit of strength. And then for the third aspect, the skin, a lot of those examples you see on the one on the left, the person used cardboard. The one in the middle and the one on the right, they used what looks like regular paper out of a sketchbook. But I've had somebody crochet panels and use the crocheted panels as the skin. That seems like it would take a lot of work. But I've also had people where I've seen students where they've made the structures secure enough that they can actually lace or weave yarn or string across it, and that makes an interesting texture. Other people have taken tape or plastic wrap or aluminum foil. A couple of people took paper that they cut into strips, then wove the strips together, glued it on one side, and then cut it to fit and use that as a skin. So there's lots of different kinds of things that you can do. The more stable of a structure you make, the greater the possibilities for the skin. But I want to point out a couple things. One is you'll notice that the paper is not applied on every surface. You can still see the sticks and structure through it. Another thing is that the paper is present. I think that that's important because I've had a couple people that they've turned these in where the only thing they've included is the structure. And this is structure with the skin, so it needs to have both elements. And sometimes the tendency can be to use a little bit too much, so try to avoid that. But it might be interesting. I think some of the more fascinating sculptures that people have done is that they've used multiple types of skin, where maybe they use some paper on some, other things they've painted or colored the paper somehow, or they use different kinds of paper. I think one of the more interesting ones is that the person used tissue paper on some and cardboard on others, so you get a variation of different translucencies, where some is solid and some lets the light through rather well. So there's a couple different things that would be interesting opportunities to just engage your creativity. Other people made it so that they used pages from books they found at like rummage sales and stuff like that, where they used the type on the paper as kind of a decorative device itself. It provided a little bit of visual texture on the paper. And that was really interesting too. So there's different ways that you can apply this. Sylvia, do you have any questions about what this is?
Not really, other than like, does it have to be linear, like how the examples are shown, or could it be like circular, like when you glue it together, or do you want it to be more linear, like a skeleton type thing?
Well, I think that that's a really good question. Since we're using a lot of stick-like forms to make the modules, that lends itself to kind of that more linear form. But you see on that example on the right-hand side that I showed you um, was a little bit more snake-like. I think if you made a module that you could be consistent with, that had a more organic feel to it, that might be really interesting. The other thing that has kind of held people back from doing that is applying the skin. It's easier to apply that if the surface that it's applied to lends itself to a flat application, like the side of a polyhedron of some sort. But if you can get the paper to apply, or the skin to apply onto a more organic surface, that could be really interesting. So I'd say play around with that as long as you meet the parameters of creating a module that you repeat and having both the skin be apparent as well as the structure, and trying to balance so that both of them feel equally important to the sculpture. I'm open to see what you come up with. I think that would be really interesting to see. So that's a really good question. Now, that is all that I have on the construction things that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to touch base with you, Whitley, on your service project, or your service learning project, how that's going along,
Yes.
if you wanted to mention it.
Yes, so I spoke with the teacher. She gets access to funding on July 1st, so that's when she'll be able to like purchase the supplies and everything. I did go to the dollar store to kind of like get an example kit so that like I could use it at my discretion.
Right.
So the book I chose was, what's it called? The Very Hungry Caterpillar by Eric Carle.
Uh-huh.
Because I like, like the paper look of the art. And so I was able to find like pom-poms that look like caterpillar body. They had a lot of like plastic food um, to include like similar things to what the caterpillar eats, and then some wooden leaves. So I think I'm hoping I can find like a copy of the book um, somewhere. That way, like I can use it and take pictures of my daughter interacting with it. That way I can like respect the student's privacy. But I
Right.
feel like she's old enough that like she can do it too. And then I even thought about um expanding it and maybe telling the library about it, like our local library, to see if that's something that they would be interested in checking out with those books for certain age groups. Um,
That's a good idea.
so
Which library are you thinking about approaching?
so I live in Saratoga Springs, and we
Okay.
have a library there. Um, and I know they're working on building a newer one, so like that might be something that they'd like to consider adding to the future, because I know that it's just really tiny right now, like the space. So yeah, I like look for books now anytime I'm at the store to like get inspired and look for books with different kind of techniques as far as illustrations go.
That's excellent. Now, I do like going to uh, Desert Industries. The one in
Hmm.
Provo is really good because it's large, and then the
Hmm.
one in American Fork,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
Both
yeah.
of those are pretty good. But I have found several copies of Hungry Caterpillar there
Okay,
for
that's good to know. Yeah,
you know.
we've got a DI in Saratoga Springs too, so I'll check that out.
Okay, but
Um,
I mean, they're almost everywhere.
okay,
You know,
that's good to know.
like snot on a toddler.
Yeah.
You know, they're pretty much ubiquitous. But the children's books like that, everybody has them,
Hmm.
everybody gives them away. So
Yep.
hopefully that And then if somebody accidentally destroys it, you're not out.
Right.
Very much.
Right.
Well, that sounds great. I'm glad to hear that that's moving forward.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear about what the time frame is too on that. You just let me know as things move forward with you. So
Yep, I
that's
can
great.
do that. Yep.
All right, excellent. Now that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to talk about today. Does anybody have any questions about the things that we covered or what's coming up next? Next week, we're going to look at examples of structure and skin, and then talk about the carving that will happen later. So anybody have any questions or observations about what we discussed?
I think I'm okay. I discussed my issue with you earlier, so I think I'm set.
Okay, good, excellent. How about you, Sylvia or Camden? All right, Camden, you're good. How about you, Sylvia?
Yeah, I didn't have any questions about what we discussed. I just have a question about like the service project thing.
Okay, what's the question?
So I actually met with the people that I'm gonna do the service learning project with right before class. And what they want me to do is something that might take more than 20 hours, and I was just wondering if that's fine.
Well, you only need to do 20 hours for this class. I'd say it depends on how much time you have available to work.
Okay.
You know, and if you can even parse it out. If it's something where there's 3 different aspects to it, the whole thing will take 30 hours, but two of the 3 aspects will take 20 hours, then just concentrate on the documenting those 2 aspects for this class. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the whole thing. It's basically they want me to build the front of a boat for a
Oh,
performance.
just a little teeny thing, like the front of a boat.
Yeah, it'll be like 7 feet by 5 feet. So
Oh, is that it? Well, I would say just use your best judgment. And if that's the
okay.
case, if it's going to take longer and you don't mind doing it, I can't require you to do it. But if it's something that you feel needs to be done that way, it is entirely up to you.
Okay. Cool.
So yeah, and if things are confusing or anything, please let me know. For anybody who's working on any of that type of stuff, and on campus, if anybody, about a quarter of the people for this class have decided to do the service learning route. If you're at a point where it's frustrating to you, and I'm not talking to Sylvia and Whitley, I'm talking about other people listening in on this. On campus, there are a couple offices, and I linked to them in that 7A.A module, and they are more than happy to connect you with somebody that can use your capacities to to very much help very much help one of the local communities, and they're really good at making those connections. One of the opportunities I had was about, I want to say a little bit more than a month ago. With the stained glass, I may have already talked to you guys about this, but in Salt Lake, there is the historic African AME, African Methodist Episcopal Church. I think it's about 6 South in Salt Lake, and some really fine example of humanity tossed some rocks through one of the windows, and they needed to get ready for a conference where they're inviting several out of town congregations to be represented. And I've been working with a lot of the different faith communities in Utah, and so it was a chance for me to go up and use some of my skill set to help repair some of the stained glass windows in their church. And that was really kind of a fun opportunity to do stuff. You're working in a neighborhood where there's not an awful lot of positivity going on. And to have that faith community right there, smack dab in the middle of that kind of environment, and have them be so positive, vibrant, and happy was just really made my week. It was really fun to work with them. And so some of these opportunities that we get, I just hope you keep your minds open to the possibilities. So I think both Whitley and Sylvia, from the very beginning of the term until now, I don't know if what you're doing now was exactly what you expected you'd be doing, a month ago. And it's kind of fun to see that take shape as you find out how you can apply your unique skill set to what's actually needed. And I really appreciate you guys doing that. Well, if there's no real questions, then we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for this week. And I will look forward to seeing everybody bright-eyed and bushy-tailed next week. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. Give me an email, and I'm more than happy to help with whatever I can. All righty?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you guys next Thursday.